Let me ask you a question. Do you live in an apartment? Now let me ask you another question. Have you ever considered how the apartment affects you psychologically? I'm assuming it's a no. So my name is Allison from year 11, and today I will be talking about the effects that architecture has on our well-being. So I can confidently say that at least 3/4 of everybody here today lives in a high-rise. Hong Kong, known as the vertical city to some, has an urban landscape characterized by towering, high-density monoliths. And to most of us, we've accepted it as a backdrop to our everyday life. But what exactly is the effect of living in this environment on our psychology? What is the relationship between our extrinsic and intrinsic environments, and more specifically, our homes on our well-being? So, as German artist Heinrich Zeil once said, you can kill a human with an apartment just as well as with an axe. We are more susceptible to our urban environments than we think. Scientifically, cells in the hippocampal regions of our brain are attuned to the arrangement of the spaces around us. We as humans are actually significantly emotionally malleable to our environments. But the question that arises then is, how can we capitalize on this to optimize our well-being? I've categorized the effects of architecture on our well-being into two components today: personal well-being and social well-being. The former is mainly driven by facade and height, and the latter by social triangulation and density. Through dissecting various factors of a building, we will pinpoint the ones most instrumental in supporting us in our well-being, whether it's personal or social. And finally, we will apply our knowledge to case studies, both unsuccessful ones and promising ones. Okay, firstly, I believe that internal or personal well-being relates to a sense of peace and inner balance, which we naturally seek. So here let's take a closer look at the aspects of a house that promote restoration and rejuvenation. Consider this first picture. How does it make you feel? Chances are you feel a sense of enthusiasm and invigoration. And now consider the next. How does this make you feel? I'm assuming it's more drab and dull and somber. We'll notice that the more alluring building has a complex facade with sloping gables, varied use of material, a medleyed color palette, russet, amber, gray, cross-hatching of vertical and horizontal planks with diagonal trim, and very complex lines. And it's very eye-catching because its optical complexity plays with our perception. And in contrast, the latter image has a blank, rather featureless facade with evenly spaced windows and hegemonic brick material. So naturally, we are less inclined to connect with this building. So, as you can see, the facade, the outer appearance of a building, plays a subconscious role in influencing our perception of a space. We can conclude that engaging creative facades are the ones that are most beneficial to our well-being, and numerous studies confirm this. Height is also a major and often overlooked factor in our perception of space. We are humans, and we were land animals before we conquered water, before we took to the skies. So I think it's safe to say that the photo on the left exudes sensations of relaxation and serenity, while the photo on the right feels more overwhelming and staggering. High rises are practical, and practicalities are definitely a priority in architecture. However, studies do reveal that low or mid-rises are in fact the height levels that are most conducive to our personal feelings of relaxation and security. Land, after all, was where our human race began, and we feel most comfortable when we're in our natural habitat. So, complex and engaging facades energize us, but bleak ones drain us, and houses that are human-scaled are the ones that make us feel most secure, as displayed in this table I created. It's important to note that these are not the only factors that affect the way you feel. Others such as greenery, light, clutter, and of course logically the safety of the living space also come into play. However, I chose to explore these because I feel that they're the ones most overlooked. Next, social connection is a key aspect of our sense of well-being. Scientifically, humans being gregarious creatures, Connecting with each other releases serotonin in our bloodstream, and we need each other to live, basically. And with the rise of chronic loneliness, architects are investigating ways to combat the issue by bolstering the social health of people through architecture. William H. White, a notable American journalist, first coined the term social triangulation, which denotes external stimuli that create a linkage between people. For example, the auditorium we would be in right now if not for the coronavirus. So maybe you guys have never seen it, but the floors slope down and the walls curve in such a way that you are all angled towards the stage and essentially pretty much forced to face me and hopefully listen also. And if the room were structured in any other way, for example, if the ground was flat, most people in the back wouldn't be able to see the stage, and as a result, I wouldn't be able to connect with them. Additionally, the sociofugal seating, chairs placed in rows, discourages you guys from talking to each other and instead encourages you to pay attention to what's happening on stage. So, I would say our auditorium is a pretty successful form of social triangulation, with architecture serving the purpose of the room. And maybe it sounds like I'm pointing out the obvious, but I've learned that most of the time things are only obvious after someone's pointed them out. With that concept in mind, let's turn our focus to housing density, which refers to the number of people who live in a given area of space. So low density housing is spread out, pretty tranquil, likely with a lot more green areas, and it sounds pleasant, right? But the flip side is that low housing density creates urban sprawl as more and more housing spreads out across rural land. And houses that are too far apart pretty obviously lead to social disconnect because they are literally physically far apart from each other. However, in terms of well-being, it seems that high-density housing isn't the solution either. Yes, it is compact and it is efficient, but from a social perspective, high-density housing like high-rises aren't particularly conducive to neighborly connection either. Think about it. We're tucked up away from the street, cooped up in our own bubbles, with amenities like gyms and pools right downstairs. So we're less inclined to venture out into the local community and participate in public spheres. Instead, we interface within our own socioeconomic capsule, within our units, and we're literally in, as architect Taz Khatri put it, silos: physical, social, and psychological. Right now with the coronavirus, the social separation definitely works in our favor, but in other circumstances, it doesn't. In fact, a Swedish study by Jay Sundquist, conducted with over 4 million Swedes, found that the rates for psychosis were 70% greater for denser areas. And this indicates that high-density living areas are not necessarily optimal for well-being, not personal and definitely not social. So we need to find a middle ground, like this photo right here, what I dub humane high density, to reach the best of both worlds. Here I have written that social triangulation arranged in a way that is most conducive to interaction would be best for our well-being, and a humane high density would be the best approach to our well-being as well in terms of density. Okay, combining both personal and social well-being, let's take a look at a case study in order to consolidate our ideas. So the Pruitt-Igoe housing complex of St. Louis, Missouri is often cited as the icon of failed modern architecture. It was first occupied in 1954 to a great deal of fanfare and optimism. However, the high-rise compound quickly became notorious for its crime, squalor, and racial segregation. These 33 buildings were nationally demolished mid-70s on live TV, and its failure is attributed to its public policy and, yes, architectural design. Let's take a look. I think we can agree that the facade is pretty monotonous without the optical complexity that keeps viewers engaged. And these huge gaps between buildings were definitely isolating and discouraged social connection. This was the 50s, so segregation was all the rage, and so the architect of Pruitt-Igoe wanted to appeal to its context. But think about it. If this complex created more opportunities for neighborly interaction, then maybe a white child could have befriended a black neighbor and they would have had their entire worldview reframed. The child would have grown up understanding that perhaps there are no inherent inequalities between races, contrary to popular belief at the time, and this would have saved the people that they come into contact with a lot of pain. So many chance encounters depend on the structure of our surroundings, and these chance encounters can drastically change our lives. Obviously, sensitively shaped buildings can't solve discrimination as a whole, but on a personal level, if the design had been more thoughtful, the worldviews and outlooks of individuals could have been changed for the better, and who knows what positive effects could stem from there. Pruitt-Igoe's design only reinforced a detached, alienated atmosphere without attempting to instill in residents a sense of character, community, or spirit. Of course, architecture wasn't the sole determinant of the project's failure, but it definitely contributed. Tanzil Shafiq, a researcher at the Melbourne School of Design, stated, "Architects and planners, albeit unwittingly, are complicit in producing an urban landscape that contributes to an unhealthy mental landscape." She urges city planners to alter their approach to urban living. As for ways to do so, suggestions are already taking form. New endeavors. So, the Chicago-based design office, Kwong von Glino, came up with this idea. Tabletop Apartments is called because of its unique structure, consists of irregular stone slabs stacked on top of each other in the form of dining tables, pictured here. The stone slabs can be arranged in approximately 25 different combinations, which allows for natural light, breathability, internal views between houses, and large communal spaces for neighbors to hang out. The stone slabs that jut out create an engaging facade and promote spaces for social triangulation. Density and height are up to the proprietor, so you can choose to build a low-rise, mid-rise, or high-rise, depending on what suits the situation best. So if we wish to focus on personal and social well-being, mid-rises would be best, and luckily this design lets us do that. An idea closer to home is the award-winning Tower Within a Tower, designed by Kwong von Glino specifically for Hong Kong, urging us to rethink the ways that we design high-rises. Instead of the common topography of pancake houses, where apartment units are arranged on flat horizontal planes and neighbors rarely see each other, the architects at Kwong von Glino propose an apartment unit where the rooms are stacked atop of each other in a sort of pyramid shape. The spaces opened up in between create internal landings, balconies, and corridors to facilitate neighborly interaction. Granted, we as humans do crave privacy and seclusion, but privacy and seclusion are only refreshing when retained in moderation. If architecture allowed more options and opportunity for social interaction and gave residents a broader scope of choice, we could alternately enjoy our privacy as well as open up to social connection. And this freedom of choice is arguably the best way to ensure well-being for everyone. Tower Within a Tower achieves this with ample social triangulation, changeable density and height, and a visually compelling facade as a bonus. And this is what it looks like in Hong Kong. So, as Winston Churchill once shrewdly remarked, we shape our buildings, thereafter they shape us. I hope that my presentation brought you a new lens through which you can view the world, especially now since we've been well acquainted with our homes for a good 4 months and spending a hearty amount of time indoors. It is doubly important to maintain healthy relationships with our space. Next time you feel stressed, maybe take a step back and consider how much of this stress comes from me and how much of it comes from what's around me. Is it possible for me to go somewhere else for a moment and calm down? Unless we're urban planners or architects, it's a tad difficult to completely revamp the high-rise dominated topography of our city. We can choose where to live though, that is our agency. So, to all the non-architects listening, maybe my talk is something that you should bear in mind when finding a place to settle down in the future. And, you can bear in mind the way that your surrounding architecture affects your life. Architecture is evolving, and the emotional well-being of residents is emerging into the limelight. Human-centered architecture is becoming the next big thing, so keep your eyes peeled. Thank you very much.